Have you ever felt that icy chill coming from Tinseltown whenever the topic of Christianity comes up? It feels like an unspoken rule in the industry. Keep your faith quiet, or else. I mean, we are talking about moments of pure, unadulterated hostility. Remember that shocking on-air clash? I refuse to associate myself with you right now. The audience gasped. Did everyone just witness that live? It was one of those jaw-dropping moments where you have to rewind the screen. Did she really just say that it's the kind of public shaming that makes you want to curl up in a ball? I honestly broke down afterwards. The tears just wouldn't stop coming. The fear is real, people. Genuinely worry. If I speak up, I might never work in this town again. But guess what? We have uncovered 8 A-list celebrities who decided that their relationship with God was absolutely non-negotiable. Career consequences be damned. These stars aren't burying their beliefs in the fine print of a contract. They are shouting their convictions from the rooftops completely unbothered, even when it threatens to cost them everything they have built. And I have to tell you, some of the names landing on this list are going to completely blow your mind. We are kicking things off with a massive teen heartthrob who went from mocking the very idea of Jesus to becoming one of the most vocal, unapologetic Christian warriors in Hollywood history. But before we jump into these explosive stories, do me a solid. Stand with us as we expose the truth about real courage in a fake world. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this with just one friend who needs a spiritual lift today. All right, let's dive right in. Kirk Cameron, you remember him as the mischievous, charming Mike Seaver on the massive hit sitcom Growing Pains. He was America's golden boy. But behind the scenes, the real Kirk Cameron was a totally different animal. He wasn't just indifferent to religion, he was a staunch, hardcore atheist who thought he had it all figured out. In his mind, Jesus belonged in the same category as other childhood myths. He literally thought the Holy Trinity consisted of the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, and God. Just total fiction. But you know that old saying, right? Sometimes a broken road is the only thing that leads you home. And get this. It wasn't some massive tragedy or a philosophical epiphany that dragged Kirk into a church pew for the first time. Nope, it was good old-fashioned teenage hormones. That is exactly right. The guy had a massive crush. He met this stunning girl on the set of Growing Pains and his brain just went offline. When she invited him to meet her family over the weekend, he was all in. He thought, this is it. This is my shot. She was gorgeous and the meeting spot just happened to be a church. He figured he could endure a sermon if it meant getting the girl. Turns out it was the single best decision he ever made. That visit introduced him to a pastor who spoke truth to power and ended up completely altering the trajectory of Kirk's entire existence. The pastor didn't mince words. He told him, Kirk, if you really want to know if the Creator exists, you need to go directly to the source. Stop asking people. Ask him. Kirk was baffled. He was thinking, okay, but how does that even work? Do I need an appointment? Can you set up a conference call? The pastor explained that he had to approach God on his terms, humility and faith. And that hit Kirk like a ton of bricks because he realised he possessed absolutely zero humility and even less faith. There is this vivid memory he shares of sitting in his flashy sports car parked on the side of a busy road, gripped by the sudden realisation of his own mortality. He thought about death and the possibility of heaven. In that moment of clarity, he knew with absolute certainty that if heaven existed, he wasn't on the guest list. That night marked the turning point. He decided to step way out of his comfort zone and actually pray. He felt this shift, a sensation that something fundamental was changing inside his heart. He just put it out there saying, God, if you are real, please show me. I need to know the truth. He prayed, if I am heading down a dead-end road, open my eyes, mould me into the man I was actually created to be. From that moment forward, Kirk's life underwent a radical 180-degree transformation. He began sharing his new faith openly on set, which, as you can imagine, created massive tension. Producers and cast members were freaked out. They didn't understand his sudden moral convictions. He eventually walked away from the typical Hollywood fame machine to build his own production company focused on family-friendly content, and he hasn't looked back once. These days, Kirk travels all across the nation speaking to packed churches and rallying believers. He produces faith-based films and absolutely refuses to compromise his Christian values, no matter how big the paycheck or the role is. But let's take a second to really appreciate that metamorphosis. Now, if you are looking to build that kind of unshakable courage in your own life, you need to go deeper into the Word with Logos. We have a special God on the Move offer waiting for you right there in the description box. Kirk Cameron is truly inspiring, isn't he? But if you thought one Cameron finding Jesus was a shocker, wait until you hear about his sister. Her journey into the absolute lion's den of daytime TV is even more dramatic. Enter Candace Cameron Bure. When she landed a hosting gig on The View, she thought it was the ultimate platform to share her light with millions of viewers. Unfortunately, she was dead wrong. It wasn't a platform, it was a battlefield. She has opened up about how brutal it was. She said, "When people don't like my perspective, they don't just disagree, they lash out. It is incredibly tough to handle. It was a daily struggle." Her co-hosts would frequently interrupt her, mock her deeply held beliefs, and openly dismiss her opinions on national television. But the ultimate breaking point, the moment that really shattered everything, happened during a heated debate about an Oregon bakery that declined to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. Candace tried to explain the nuance, saying, "I don't think this is discrimination." She argued this is about freedom of association. It's about constitutional rights. It's about the First Amendment protecting personal convictions. She tried to make the point that we all have the right to choose who we associate with, professionally emphasising that the bakers didn't refuse service based on the person. And that is when Raven Simonet snapped. She literally turned away and said, "I refuse to associate myself with you right now." It was a cold, calculated move to humiliate her live on air. Candace tried to clarify that they didn't refuse the cake because of sexual orientation, but the damage was done. The hostility was palpable. Candace went home heartbroken. She thought she had joined a table where diverse voices were celebrated, where her perspective would be respected, even if they disagreed. Instead, it felt like they took pleasure in tearing her down, especially whenever she tried to bring a biblical perspective to the conversation. The irony was bitter. The show is called The View because it is supposed to represent 5 different viewpoints, but clearly hers was the one view they couldn't tolerate. Look, when you really get down to it, it all depends on which angle you are viewing the situation from. Way back in 2016, Candace made the difficult decision to prioritise her family unit and her faith over a prestigious, high-profile career spot that most people would kill for. She walked away without a single glance in the rearview mirror, but the criticism followed her straight to the Great American Family Network the moment she announced her intention to keep traditional marriage as the beating heart of her Christmas movie empire. The Hollywood machine immediately slapped her with labels like bigoted and homophobic, but Candace stands as firm as a rock and refuses to bow to the pressure. Instead of clapping back on social media, she spends hours deep in prayer and studying the Bible, mentally arming herself for the spiritual warfare she has to fight every single day. But it brings to mind that heavy biblical truth: anyone who harbours hate for their brother or sister is essentially a murderer, because the Almighty looks past our actions and judges the secret intent of our hearts. Let's be honest, sometimes the price tag for standing up for what you believe in is way steeper than anyone ever anticipates. But as far as Candace sees it, the sacrifice is absolutely worth it. And speaking of celebrities paying a heavy price, let's talk about the actor whose career flatlined the exact second he agreed to portray the Messiah. Despite the industry backlash, his personal life is infinitely richer for it. We're talking about Jim Caviezel, the man who used to be Tinseltown's absolute golden boy. He had it all: blockbuster leading roles, top-tier agents clawing out each other's eyes to sign him, and the entire entertainment world resting at his feet. And then Mel Gibson called. Jim remembers it vividly. I picked up the phone and told him, "Yeah, look, I'm swamped right now." And the voice says, "Hey, Jim, it's Mel." I was clueless, so I asked, "Mel who?" He replies, "I don't know." Mel Brooks. Jim joked. Meanwhile, Gibson was probably puffing on a cigarette on the other end, and he just cut to the chase. Look, do you still want to play this Jesus guy or what? Gibson wasn't just offering him the role of a lifetime, even though it looked like a golden ticket. He was fully aware that he was practically handing Jim a career death sentence, and he didn't hide that fact. So he gave the young actor some space to really think it over, but not before issuing a chilling warning that Jim would never be able to forget. Mel told him straight up, if you take this gig, you might never work in this town again. Suddenly, Jim found himself standing at a massive crossroads in his life. His options were clear choice. A was to play it safe and keep the fame, or choice B was to step into something divine and see where the chips fell. By now, we all know exactly which path he took. Jim admitted, I was terrified for a split second, but then this overwhelming sense of peace just washed over me. It was tangible. I could literally feel it. I knew it was from heaven, so I told him, look, man, we are all called to carry our own cross eventually. If you refuse to pick it up and carry it, you are going to get crushed by the weight of it anyway. That film, The Passion of the Christ, went on to rake in a staggering $612 million across the globe. But Mel's prophecy was spot on about the career suicide. Jim's mainstream opportunities took a nosedive, and yet he doesn't regret a single second of it. The production was brutal. He was literally struck by lightning during filming, dislocated his shoulder carrying the cross, and nearly bit his own tongue off in an accident. In a candid interview later, he insisted that all that pain drove him back to what mattered, saying, it forced me straight into the arms of my God because, frankly, I had nowhere else to turn. Fast forward to today, and he is suiting up to play Jesus once again in Gibson's highly anticipated sequel. It really is a full circle moment, because when you commit to spreading the word of God, the big man upstairs always finds a way to balance the ledger. Hey, before we continue, we just want to mention how incredibly thankful we are for our amazing sponsor, BodySurf, who supports us in sharing these powerful testimonies. BodySurf is a unique beach lifestyle brand founded by believers who simply wanted to help people disconnect from their screens and spend more time reconnecting with the outdoors. So if you are all about the ocean-seeking adventure and spreading good vibes, you need to check out what they are doing at shopbodysurf.com. Now, since we are already on the topic of the Passion, we have to talk about the mastermind who actually willed the project into existence. Because if you thought Jim got the short end of the stick for playing Jesus, just wait until you hear the price Mel Gibson had to pay so he could tell the story that nobody in Hollywood wanted told. We all know the legend of Mel Gibson. Everyone remembers him as Brett Maverick. You know, the charming, silver-tongued gambler who could con his way out of a firing squad. Whoa, slow down there, don't shoot me. Okay, I'm just trying to explain myself here. I was just making the point that I don't see the big appeal in trying to be a hero. But the man who brought that character to life was about to face the biggest gamble of his entire career. When the Hollywood elites saw the script for The Passion of the Christ, every single door was slammed right in Gibson's face. He recalls getting the messages loud and clear. All the major studios refused to distribute it. Mel realised, okay, nobody's going to touch this. I guess I've lost the financing. But Gibson decided to take the risk anyway. The film ended up shattering box office records, but the industry establishment still turned their backs on him. There was this strange vibe all over town. People were whispering, did anyone else just see that? Did you see what he just pulled off? They were baffled, asking, is there any way that guy can actually do that again? And as if fighting the studio system wasn't enough, Gibson was also battling a war inside his own head. I am flawed because by nature I was born an alcoholic. Right, I did the drugs. I drank the alcohol. And for the longest time, there was absolutely nothing that could stop me from self-destructing. Nothing worked until he found something far bigger than his own ego to save his life. You see, throughout all the chaos, Gibson always knew deep down that he was a believer. He surrendered himself fully to Christ, which meant that no matter how hard life hit him, he would always have a spiritual safety net to fall back on. So I look at the fact that I was able to appeal to something greater than myself to help me and actually stop me from doing that. I think that is a bona fide miracle. Nowadays, Gibson is gearing up for the Passion of the Christ resurrection, doubling down on the very message that Hollywood tried to punish him for in the first place. He is refusing to retreat an inch, and frankly, playing it safe isn't even in his vocabulary anymore. If anything, he has dialed up the volume on his spiritual convictions, demonstrating to everyone watching that when the creator assigns you a mission, the industry's cold shoulder is completely irrelevant. But let's shift gears from the high-stakes world of Hollywood gamblers to the small screen's most surprising messenger, a woman who transformed her celebrity status into a genuine ministry, the incomparable Roma Downey. For 9 incredible seasons, Roma Downey captivated audiences as the glowing, benevolent angel on Touched by an Angel. But the most profound lesson she ever absorbed didn't happen on a soundstage. It happened in the gritty reality of life. While paying a visit to a children's hospital in Salt Lake City, Roma crossed paths with a mother who was drowning in grief, having just moments before lost her child to illness. The woman looked up, locked eyes with the actress, and gasped, "Monica!" She told her through tears, "I prayed the Lord would send an angel to watch over my baby, and now here you are standing in front of me." Roma was struck silent, struggling with imposter syndrome in the face of such raw pain. Yet she instinctively wrapped her arms around the grieving woman and prayed with her right there in the hallway. Later that evening, she phoned her co-star and mentor, Della Reese, confessing that she felt like a fraud for receiving that kind of reaction. But Della dropped a truth bomb she would never unhear. Della said, "And tell me, baby, who says the Almighty didn't send you? You were standing there exactly because that is where you were meant to be standing." She realised that if they were going to be vessels through this television series, they had to learn to put their egos aside and let the message work. That single epiphany completely rewired Roma's perspective. Fast forward to today, and Roma, alongside her powerhouse husband, Mark Burnett, stands at the helm of an empire producing faith-based content that touches the hearts of millions around the globe. She launches every single morning with a specific intention, actively scanning for opportunities to serve as the physical extension of God's love in the world. As she puts it, "In the morning, I anchor my day in gratitude." Whether you're a believer or not, just pause to think, how can I be of service to someone else before the sun goes down? Roma isn't striving for some unattainable image of perfection. She is simply aiming for kindness, allowing that compassion to be the vehicle that alters the trajectory of people's lives. And really, isn't that the whole point of it all? But let's pivot from the gentle angels of television to the rugged warriors of real life. Our next A-lister doesn't just pay lip service to his beliefs, he backs up every word with cold, hard, tangible action that you can't ignore. Enter Kevin Sorbo. While he spent his college years with his nose in business textbooks, his heart was always beating for the stage and the screen. So when he eventually landed the iconic role of Hercules, it felt like destiny fulfilled, yet amidst the fame, he never neglected to offer gratitude to the one who put him there. When we talk about being completely all in for Christ, nobody walks the walk quite like Kevin Sorbo, and he openly admits that this spiritual foundation is the bedrock of his existence. He was raised in the Lutheran tradition, but here is where the narrative takes a sharp turn. There comes a definitive moment in every believer's timeline where their convictions are put through the fire. In Sorbo's specific situation, calling it a test is a massive understatement. It was more like a full-blown siege on his physical existence. He was struck down by a catastrophic brain aneurysm that brought him to the very edge of death's door, threatening to end his story right there. He recalled the horror. My left subclavian artery had burst open, sending thousands of clots flooding into my arm. The doctors were looking at it and genuinely thought amputation was the only option. The nightmare didn't end there. He was subsequently hit by a cascade of strokes that stripped him of his vision and left him unable to walk, a devastating blow for an action star. That was the breaking point where Kevin had a raw, honest conversation with his creator. "I just collapsed emotionally," he said. "I cried out, if this disability is my new reality, then you have to give me the strength to battle through it every single day." And this is the part where the plot thickens in the most miraculous way. Despite the grim prognosis that he would live out his days with severe disabilities, Kevin defied the odds and made a complete 100% recovery, noting, "I filmed 40 movies since that dark time. I am on set filming one right now with another project lined up immediately after Martin," he says, and he unflinchingly credits God for pulling him back from the brink. He explains his philosophy. Faith isn't something tangible you can hold in your hand. You can't physically touch it. It is a deep-seated belief system. It is something that burns inside of you, and I desperately needed that hope and faith to force myself past the pain of what I was enduring every single day. These days, he is a hero without a script. He champions a world fit for kids, which stands as the #1 after-school program across the entire state of California. He highlights the urgency. We are facing a staggering 54% dropout rate in that specific city, with kids quitting as early as the 5th grade. But for 18 years running, we have maintained a 98% graduation rate among the 12,000 kids we mentor, proving his faith works in the real world. However, Sorbo's boldest professional move was starring in the film God's Not Dead, where he played against type as an atheist professor tormenting a Christian student. The film became the highest-grossing independent movie of 2014, and while it painted a target on Sorbo's back in liberal Hollywood, he remains unbothered because his faith isn't just a theory. It is active, it is practical, and it is unapologetically loud. And speaking of unapologetic, our next star faced the full wrath of the industry simply for standing up for traditional values. Let's talk about Patricia Heaton. Patricia Heaton stood on the precipice of losing everything she had built when she decided to prioritise pro-life activism over acceptance from the Hollywood elite, despite being sitcom royalty from her time on Everybody Loves Raymond. Yet around 2004, she watched as her career nearly disintegrated before her eyes. Casting directors lost her number and fellow actors quietly distanced themselves. The industry's ultimatum was crystal clear: keep your religious views in the closet or go find a different line of work. But Heaton's faith is rooted in something far deeper than career longevity. Having lost her mother when she was just a tender 12 years old, Patricia was left with a gaping emotional void that she found only God could effectively fill. She reflects on her perspective. The beauty of being Catholic is knowing this isn't the end. This is not the last time I will see my mother. We are destined to be reunited. There is simply this interim period where she is not physically present, but the relationship isn't over. Today, Heaton continues to be a voice for truth-producing entertainment that mirrors her personal values and steadfastly refusing to offer apologies for her convictions. She has proven to the world that sometimes the greatest risk you can take is remaining true to who you are when the entire world is screaming at you to compromise. But you have to ask yourself, what happens when a guy who built an entire empire on debauchery, mocking the divine and celebrating every vice known to man, suddenly flips the script to become one of the loudest megaphones for Christianity? To answer that, we need to dive into the story of the final celebrity on our list, the ultimate wildcard, Russell Brand. For decades, Brand wasn't just in the industry, he was Hollywood's walking definition of pure chaos. We are talking about a man who stacked up millions of dollars by being as provocative, lewd, and spiritually defiant as humanly possible, offending everyone in his path for sport. Interviewers would often look him in the eye and say, "You have lived 1,000 lives, Russell." And let's be honest, a lot of those chapters contain things most people would bury deep rather than celebrate. And let's not forget the rap sheet. You have been in handcuffs more than a few times, haven't you? Brand would admit it without blinking, claiming he was practically a regular in the back of a squad car. When asked to put a specific number on his run-ins with the law, he reckons it was around 11 times. 11 arrests. To the average person, that sounds like the resume of someone who's too far gone to ever come back from the brink. In short, if you were placing bets on who would turn to Jesus, Russell Brand would have had the longest odds in Vegas. But look at him now standing centre stage, not to tell a dirty joke, but to bow his head in prayer while the whole world watches. He is out there explicitly invoking the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, declaring him as the one true heavenly saviour without a hint of irony. He is publicly thanking the Almighty for every blessing, expressing gratitude for the very gift of consciousness that allows us to feel the divine presence in our daily lives. So you have to wonder what on earth happened in the gap between the leather pants wearing rebel and this humble believer. The truth is shocking. Brand's road to Damascus didn't begin in a cathedral or a revival tent. It started in the terrifying sterile corridors of a children's hospital. That is where reality hit him harder than any substance ever could. He was staring down the most agonising nightmare a parent can face. His tiny infant son required urgent life-saving heart surgery. In that moment, the celebrity status, the bank accounts, the sharp tongue, and the millions of fans, it all evaporated. None of it could save his boy. As Brand described it, surrendering your fragile child to strangers knowing they are facing a grueling 10-hour operation feels like a trial ripped straight out of the Old Testament. Something fundamentally shattered inside him while he waited in those halls. For the first time, his comedy armour failed him. He couldn't punchline his way out of this grief. He realised he had zero control over whether his son lived or died. He was completely helpless. And in that desperation, he did the one thing he used to ridicule. He opened the Bible. He confessed that as he reads the text now, it is absolutely shattering his worldview, blowing his mind every single day with its relevance. He speaks about being flawed by the profound nature of the words, the intense beauty and the fundamental truths that are just sitting there waiting for anyone to pick them up. Miraculously, his son survived the surgery and recovered. Brand didn't brush that off. He saw it as a divine signal. Fast forward to 2024 and he took the plunge, literally getting baptised in the River Thames. The irony is thick enough to cut with a knife. The very same massive platform he once utilised to tear down religious ideas is now his pulpit for preaching Christ. His digital presence hasn't shrunk. It has shifted. He is broadcasting the gospel truth to millions of subscribers who tune in for his spiritual evolution. He puts it simply, he went from a narcissist thinking he was the Messiah to a humble man realising he desperately needs the Messiah. Now he wants to emulate the Apostle Paul and dedicate his existence to this truth. And that is the rundown. Whether they are TV icons or blockbuster action heroes, these famous faces are demonstrating what it truly means to go all in for faith, regardless of the backlash. The consequences vary. Some have watched their careers implode, others endure daily ridicule online, and we even saw a couple who decided Hollywood approval was more important than biblical integrity. However, the ones who refused to fold, the ones who stood on the rock, discovered a sense of peace and purpose that Tinseltown's glitz could never offer. It is clear that the Almighty is making moves in the culture, scouting for souls who are brave enough to follow him, even if it costs them their reputation. If these tales of redemption struck a chord with you, smash that subscribe button right now and don't keep it to yourself. Share this story with a friend who needs a wake-up call. Catch you in the next one.